Hi. So I grew up in Australia in a place called Melbourne. I was the oldest of 4 kids. Dad was a cop, Mum was a housewife. And we moved to a place called Canberra when I was 10. Really? That's the first time I've ever heard that. I didn't do too well in Canberra. I got into a lot of trouble. I probably got in everyone's fair share of trouble. I was fighting, I was drinking, I was slashing my arm. I did not deal well with being a teenager. Mum was so proud. And I just continued down that path for some reason. I was lost, I didn't have any direction, and I ended up getting kicked out of home at 17 and bumbled through life until I hit about 21. And I decided, stuff this. If I continue down this path, I'm going to be dead or in jail by the time I was 23, and that's not a very great prospect. So I decided to do the only thing I could think of. I'll remove myself from this environment that I've become a product of, and I threw everything that I owned into this tiny little car that they don't even make anymore. I didn't have a license for. And I headed off to the bright lights of Brisbane, where my friend Matt had a job waiting for me behind a bar in a strip club. And I started making music with some other guys, and we were having a lot of fun. We put out an album. We opened up for Snoop Dogg. Yeah, obviously being white guys in Australia, we were rapping, duh. But not a lot of money in white rappers in Brisbane in 1998. And it all fell to pieces, and I was really, really lost, and I was petrified of taking a step back. So I did what we often do when we're a bit lost. I called Mum. And she said, why don't you talk to your 2 younger brothers? They're in the army, they love it, so I did. And I said, hey, what do you think about me joining the army? And they pissed themselves. They did give me one bit of advice. They said, whatever you do, don't join infantry. So I joined infantry. And you know what? I'll be forever grateful to the army for not just giving me experiences that normal people do not get to have, but also teaching me how to be a valuable member of society, for teaching me how to be a real man, and for allowing me to serve my country. And I spent 4 years as an army paratrooper, but I had this longing to do more and see more and stop shitting in a hole in the bush. And so I looked further afield, and I found out about these things called the clearance divers in the Navy. And I didn't know much about them. I knew they were a little bit special. They were a bit like the SAS Special Forces, a bit like the Commandos. No one looked directly at them. Just sort of went, oh shit, there's those guys. And I thought to myself, why can't I be one of those guys? What's stopping me from being a bit special like that? And I couldn't come up with an answer. So I decided, I'll give it a crack, I'll give it a go. And I did my service transfer, I went over to the Navy, and I did the first course, which was 3 weeks long. It's called Ship's Divers. It's where you learn to scuba dive, which was great because I'd never scuba dived in my life, and search for bombs. Now, generally, those 2 things don't go hand in hand. You're not going to go to your local paddy and learn how to scuba dive and search for some mines, but that was the task, and I passed. And then I went on to the 10-day clearance diver selection testing, a little bit like the Navy SEALs test. 70% of my course quit, most of them on the first day. I lost 15 pounds, but I passed. And not only did I discover my dream job, I discovered my dream life. I wasn't running around the bush pooping and sleeping in a hole anymore. We were doing maritime tactical operations, mine countermeasures, diving into the ocean out the sides of helicopters to blow up mines and explosives, underwater battle damage repair, diving on the modern day diving helmets and using almost any handheld tool you can think of, but underwater. And for anyone who's seen the movie Hurt Locker, we were also doing EOD, or explosive ordnance disposal, arguably the most dangerous job in the military. And I was doing this job and living this amazing lifestyle for 5 years. And one day I went to work and we were doing a very mundane task. It was a counter-terrorism exercise. It really wasn't that great. I was pretending to be an attack swimmer. I was on the surface in Sydney Harbour, on my back, black wetsuit, black fins, just kicking my legs. And I was probably only in the water for about 4 minutes. And I looked over my left shoulder to make sure that I was going in the right direction. And before I could turn back, I got a massive whack in my leg. And I really didn't think too much of it because it didn't hurt. I thought maybe the guys in the boat got a little bit too close. I don't know. I turned around and I looked down and came face to face with a massive shark's head. Not what I was expecting. Literally my worst nightmare. I was terrified of sharks. There was only 2 things in life that I was absolutely petrified of: sharks and public speaking. It's funny how life works out. But I didn't know what to do. It felt like we stared eye to eye for a couple of seconds, and then my survival instinct kicked in and I thought, I've seen the crocodile hunter, I'll jab it in the eyeball. But I couldn't move my arm. And I looked down and I could see a row of teeth all across my thigh and across my wrist. My hand was also in the shark's mouth. So I thought, left hand. And I reached over, but it had me by the back of the leg and I couldn't reach the eyeball. I tried to push it off by the nose. I tried to punch it in the head, and that did nothing, except I think piss it off. That's when it started to shake me, and that's when the pain kicked in. Now, when a bull shark grabs something, its top jaw latches on first, and then the movable bottom jaw comes in underneath. And as it shakes, its teeth act as a saw. It was sawing the flesh out of my body and drowning me at the same time. It lasted about 8 seconds. And at the end there, I accepted the fact that I was going to die. I had a 300-pound monster. Sorry, that's 300 kilos, so 600-pound monster, something akin to that, just tearing me to shreds. And you become very aware of how out of your element you are when something that big wants to eat you, and there was no getting away from it. And I thought to myself, I'm not going home today. I'm going to die right now. And a calm came over me. And I thought to myself, I've lived 10 lifetimes in these 31 years. And if I'm going to go, I'm ready. And then I popped to the surface. The tail of the shark splashed water in my face. I saw my safety boat and I thought, shit, I'm not dead. I better get out of here. So I started to swim, but my hand was gone and my arm ended at the end of my wetsuit. And all those hundreds of hours of medical training kicked in, and I thought, I've got to keep that wound above my heart to stem the bleeding. So I started swimming with one hand and one leg because I couldn't even feel my right leg. I had no idea what was wrong with it. I just couldn't feel it. My buddies in the safety boat had seen what was happening and they started gunning it over towards me. They said that when they got close, they could see I was swimming through a pool of my own blood. Fortunately for me, they got to me first. They pulled me out of the water, laid me flat in the boat, and just out of the sheer relief of not being eaten anymore, I passed out. Tomo sprung into action. His training taught him that I was going into cardiac arrest and he needed to stimulate my heart. So he jumped on top of me and he gave me what we call a series of short, sharp jabs to the chest. And it worked. I woke up and I looked over and my hand was gone, freshly mangled by a shark. And I looked up and Tomo was beating the shit out of me. And I just thought, today sucks. I got my priorities in order and I looked at Tomo and I said, mate, can you make sure someone looks after my motorbike? And he shook his head. They got me to the wharf, but the paramedics hadn't turned up at that point, and my chief came down and took control of the situation because they could not stop the bleeding from my leg. He located an artery that was squirting blood, and he grabbed the new guy, Lockie, and he said, Lockie, you've got to stop that bleeding or he's going to die. Lockie had to sit there for 10 minutes with his hand inside my leg, pinching closed a slippery, squirting artery. Something he said he never wants to do again. Ever, ever, ever. But he saved my life. And eventually the paramedics turned up and whisked me off to hospital. And I don't really remember much about the next couple of days. I remember waking up and looking down and seeing that my foot was still there. And I was pretty happy about that. And I ended up keeping it for a week. But the surgeon came in after that first week and he broke it down for me, and he told me that, look, you can keep your leg, Paul, but we can cover up the scars with a skin graft. The chunk will always be there. You'll walk with a limp. You'll never run again. You'll carry that leg around like a lump of dead wood. Your happiness will suffer. Your motivation will suffer. Alternatively, we can remove your leg and have you walking, possibly running on a prosthetic within 12 months. I was so high on morphine and ketamine that I looked him square in the face and said, Doc, you can take my leg and turn me into a Terminator.